Okay, yep, thanks. Thanks, Bruce. All right, so I mentioned, did the McDonald's get sheets? Okay. I mentioned that this class is a 6-week class. We're in our second week, and we taught the first part of following Jesus last year. And this year, we're trying to be a more action-oriented. There's going to be some repetition in this class because if I quizzed you right now, I know that not everyone, maybe some of you, but not everyone could recite everything that was said last night, either by you or by me. So we're going to do some repetition, and it starts with the idea of following Jesus is a lot different today than the word following means for Facebook or Instagram, right? There's a difference in following your favorite music artist or your favorite athlete or your favorite friend on Facebook or Instagram. And we spoke about that last time. Can anybody remember what the biggest difference is?
Can't be passive.
Thank you, Tessa. Yeah, we can't be passive. So if you get your sheet, that's number one. We can't be passive. If we're going to be real disciples of Jesus, real Jesus followers, real believers, we can't be passive. So this class is all about focusing on taking an active and intentional approach to following Jesus today. Sometimes we think back to Jesus' time and we get caught up in how do you apply that to today? We want to focus on how you follow Jesus today, how we follow Jesus today, and the incredible intimate relationships that are going to be built when we do it God's way. We're going to have an intimate relationship with God, with Jesus, with the Spirit, and with those who are discipling us, we're discipling, and our brothers and sisters in Christ, right? So there's a lot of wonderful things that come out from following Jesus. Last week, we talked about Peter and how he walked on water. And we talked about the only reason why Peter was able to walk on water, even for a short amount of time, was because he put his faith into action. And so in number 2, Peter put the 3 words are faith into action. And we talked about how, gave another example about a tightrope walker. And the tightrope walker walked over Niagara Falls. And the phrase that we used from that story was, get in the wheelbarrow. If you don't know the story, you can ask me after class or ask somebody else, but get in the wheelbarrow. So when we're trying to remember to put our faith into action, we need to remember 2 phrases. One is, get out of the boat. And the second is, get in the wheelbarrow. And both of those remind us that if we really believe, we'll take action. And if our belief is a little wishy-washy, we're not going to take action. There's been lots of times in my life where I've said I believed, but when I actually had to step out on that faith, on that belief, I was nervous, I was a little bit scared, and that's okay. It's okay to be afraid. When we feel that fear, it's a reminder to stop depending upon ourselves and depend upon God. And so when you think about stepping out on faith and you start to feel that fear, just remember, we're doing it with God, and God doesn't fail. So to put your faith into action, we need to get out of the boat and get in the wheelbarrow. We've got to put our faith into action. So here's an opportunity. Put your faith into action. The homework last week was to take a little time and put together a 20 to 30 second version, kind of in business we call that the elevator pitch or speech, talk, whatever you want to call it. 20 to 30 seconds of what happened at your conversion. What's your conversion story? And we said when you can put that together, you're going to have a short version, you're going to have a much longer version. But if you can tell that short version, you're often going to get somebody to want to know the longer version. We talked about this as a way for us to witness to others by just telling a 20 to 30 second version of your conversion story. So, does anybody have a short version of their conversion story? You got one, Monty? Okay.
Mine is pretty boring. I really was born into a family that was very much a believer in Jesus Christ. Not just mom and dad, but grandparents as well, with preaching history going back a couple of generations. So that was my situation. My dilemma was I wasn't committed. I was part of the family and was baptized, but even at baptism, I wasn't really fully committed. And then the solution for me was, I think, crystallized a few years ago when Paul Davis, in one of his Sunday school classes, talked about I don't know what he phrased it, but it was our conversion over time. And he showed a continuum where it gets to be more and more of your life. And that song, More of Thee, that just says it all. But for me, it was literally decades. It's a decade process.
Yeah. So, I think sometimes we think about someone that grows up in the church, they don't have a good conversion story because they just been with it the whole time, right? But people need to hear a conversion story just like Monty's, where he grew up in the church, he was surrounded by it, he believed, he was baptized, but the problem was he wasn't committed. And then over decades, God didn't give up on him. God continued to pursue Monty in all kinds of ways, and his faith, his belief, and his commitment grew. There are tons of people out there that are in that I had it all my life, but I'm not committed phase. And they need to hear a conversion story like that. Right? Anybody else? Dick?
Mine's the exact opposite of Monty's. I had no real faith. And I met Pam on just a blind meeting. We'll say I was set up to go to buy her place with a friend of mine. But anyway, I liked her, so I started going out. So our second or third time I went by her apartment down in Salem, she started preaching to me. Talking about the Bible to me. And I started laughing at her. And I said, "You believe that stuff?" I said, "We were taught when I was in high school and all that, those are all mainly just stories. None of that was true." So she got mad, started crying, and I'm sitting on the couch here. She walked about 8 feet into the bedroom, slammed the door. I said, "Man, what did I do?" Next thing I know, I heard the door open, but I wouldn't turn and look at her. Next thing I know, I got hit in the head. She threw her Bible, hit me in the side of the head. She said, "You need to read this." So I got hit with the word. But so literally I picked it up, started looking at it, and I started going to church with her so I started going to church, and I was amazed coming here at the love, the affection, and the singing. And then we got married a couple months later and started a Bible study with the minister, a weekly Bible study, so I got baptized a couple months after that. So
Yeah.
It was to get hit with the word like that, I tell you what, it was
That's great. For those of you that may not have heard that, Dick talked about he had no faith. He was laughing at it. He met Pam. She started sharing with him. He laughed at her, didn't believe it, told her he didn't believe it, and she went into the bedroom, slammed the door, grabbed her Bible, came back, hit him in the head with it, he eventually started studying and became a Christian and has been 6 months later. So sometimes it doesn't happen in 3 days. Sometimes it's 3 years. But there are people just like Dick that need to hear that, someone else has gone from not believing and laughing at it to, a life full of faithfulness. Anybody else? All right.
My family didn't become Christians until I was 12 years old. And we started going to church, and they were big partiers, big drinkers. And they gave all of that up very suddenly. And my dad immediately started telling the good news to other people. And they had the Jewel Miller film strips.
Yeah.
And he was showing them to all of our relatives, anybody he could get in our house. So I saw those over and over and over. And then shortly after that, my sister became a Christian. And then shortly after that, I did too. Well, my parents became Christians first.
Yeah.
But what really impressed me is they left all of their old friends that were not Christians. They were encouraged to make friends with Christians at church, because otherwise they would be pulled back into that. And so I just always was very excited, or not excited, very proud that they made such a drastic difference in their life. And my dad constantly after that was teaching other people. And he later became a deacon and then an elder of the church. And so he was a very, very strong influence in my life.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, Marlene's case, her family were big partiers, big drinkers. Her mom and dad became Christians, and then her dad started teaching others right away. A lot of us think that if you haven't gone to Bible college, you can't teach anybody. But her dad, from the very beginning after becoming, he started sharing. And that's one of the points I want to make today is like the whole definition of being a disciple is accepting and assisting in the spreading teachings of Jesus, right? And all of us in here, I'm looking around, all of us have probably forgot more than so many people out in the world know. I was one of those people. I thought I was a Christian, and I didn't even know there were two parts to the Bible, right? Simple things. Whatever we know, we can teach, we can share. Okay. Thank you. I also, Jim Farley's teaching over in the in the teen house, and he hit me up and he said, I got my conversion story, but I won't be there, so here it is. He's like, and these are his words, not mine. There was this guy, he was a blockhead, and he was just doing the wrong stuff. And he got invited to church, and his problem is that he felt like he had to be perfect before he could become a Christian. And then the preacher took him out back. I thought he was going to beat him up or something, but the preacher took him out back, and he said, that's exactly why you need to become a Christian, because you can't do it on your own. You can't be perfect. And again, a life of faithfulness has resulted from that. So thank you guys for sharing. I hope that if you haven't put that 30-second conversion story together, that you will, because it will impact other people. When you think about, when you share your conversion story, what happens? What are the results of you sharing your conversion story? When you share your conversion story, even if it's a 30-second conversion story, what's the result of that? For you, for others, what's the result? Monica?
It's a reminder of where we were.
Yeah.
It's also, it rekindles those feelings, gives us hope, gives evidence of it.
Yeah.
And so they can identify with, if you share your story of being lost or unfocused, a lot of people can identify with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So Monica said, one, it reminds you of where you were and how lost you were. It also tells others that you were lost at one time. Because when they see someone that's living a faithful life, they think they've been that way all their life. It gives people hope, she said. And people are lost. They're looking for that hole that they have in their lives, and it's God that needs to fill that. And thanks, Monica.
The second part of what Monica said is basically what I was going to say. Most people, when they look at somebody who's been a Christian for a long time, think, well, they've just always been that way. But I remember I was working with somebody one time, and he had a bad problem with cursing. So every time he would curse around me, obviously I was making some sort of a reaction because he could tell at some point that I didn't care for that. He said something to me about it one time, and I said, well, when I was young, I had a hard time with that. I had to really work to get away from saying things that I shouldn't say. And he said, oh, I have no idea. You've never even thought about saying something like that as far as I'm concerned, so I just didn't realize you had that issue. So I think from then on, he was a little more careful around me. He tried to be a little more respectful for the fact that I had dealt with that issue.
He said that when he was working with someone that had a really trouble with cursing, and he must have, Bill said he must have saw his reactions every time the guy saw Bill's reaction every time the guy cursed, because he said something, and Bill said, I used to have a trouble with that as well, and the guy was shocked. What Bill did in that, we've talked about this. So your conversion story is witnessing, but so is what Bill just talked about. So is just saying, I don't do that because God doesn't want me to, or I've been convicted that that's not right. That's also sharing the teachings of Jesus. So appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead.
One thing that I was really impressed with my dad is he would just take his Bible out and then he would go from one verse to the other. And I thought, we haven't been a Christian very long. How does he know all of those verses? And what he would do is mark as in his Bible, and he would open up to the first verse, yeah, that's what I was trying to come up with. Open up to the first verse, and then he would write the second verse, the second place that he wanted to go to.
Smart.
There. And then from when he went to the next one, then he wrote another verse that would take him to the next one. So he didn't have to have notes or anything. I mean, he did, but they were in his Bible.
Yeah.
You know, just go from this verse to this verse to this verse.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really a neat way to teach people.
I think that's a really great example of being prepared to share, right? Marlene said that her dad started with one verse, and then he had the next verse written on that page of the first verse, and just kept doing that and was able to lead someone through the gospel message that way. What a great example. I've seen people use written notes off to the side. That's okay too. But what a great creative way to lead someone through. And I remember Marlene and I talked about this the other day, and that was her dad's Bible. Like, he had that separate, it seemed like, from others maybe, you know, and that was the Bible he taught people from, which again, you know, you're preparing to share your faith. Yeah, I think we've covered the things that I was thinking. It reminds us of what God has done for us. It builds our faith. It causes others to want to know more when we share our conversion story. It sets an example for others to share their story. And it can give others hope that God can save them too. Kind of like Jim was thinking, I'm not in a place where God can save me. I'm not good enough. And we all know that you can't be good enough. So thanks for sharing. All right, so we talked a little bit about this, but the definition of being a disciple is one who accepts and assists in spreading the teachings of Jesus. So most of us look at that and think, well, I've definitely done the first part. I've accepted it. But how often have I assisted in spreading the teachings of Jesus? But all those folks that just spoke up, you've done the second part. I know many of you are also teachers and some of you have preached, but you've definitely done both just by witnessing this morning, sharing your conversion stories or sharing your examples of witnessing. So we talked in number 4 on your sheets, your conversion story should have 3 parts. Quite frankly, this is just simple storytelling. It's a setting or a situation, a problem, and a solution. And all of you that have young kids, if you go through every Disney movie, that's exactly what you're going to see. You're going to see a setting, you're going to see a problem, you're going to see a solution. And most of the great stories that we've read in books have that same thing, a setting or a situation, a problem, and a solution. Even if the solution isn't the solution you want it sometimes. And then the definition, number 5, continue to write that out so it embeds it in your mind. A Jesus follower, a disciple, is one who accepts and assists in spreading the teachings of Jesus. And sometimes both those parts are sometimes difficult for us to remember, accepting and assisting. In following Jesus, we talked about 2 stories last week. One was this little boy who played the piano with a piano master at his side. And the takeaway from that story was do life with God, right? So often I find myself trying to do life on my own, trying to accomplish things for God on my own, as opposed to doing it with him. And so I just constantly need to remind myself to do life with God. For those of you who have kids or who have friends, sometimes you'll watch your kids or you'll watch your friends try to do things by themselves, and you're like, why didn't you ask me? I would have helped. I would have been glad to help. And they didn't want to bother you, or your kids wanted to do it on their own to show you how much they could do. It's the same way with God. He wants to help us. He wants to do life with us. The other story was, and I could so relate to this one. Can you go back? I guess, maybe you can reverse here. One more. That one, yeah. A little boy, scared of storms. He always ends up at his parents' bed. When he ends up at his parents' bed this time, he says, his dad says to him, typical dad, "You don't need to be afraid. Jesus is with you." Well, maybe not typical, but Dad's trying to solve the problem. And the little boy says, he must have had faith. He said, "I know, but I need Jesus with skin on." And so, as we follow Jesus, we want to be Jesus with skin on. One of the things that Dick said in his conversion story was he immediately felt the difference in this congregation of the love between the brothers and sisters and the love people had for one another and how involved they were and how involved in their lives each other were. That's exactly what Lisa and I saw in the very first church that we were a part of, and what we saw here and what we've seen in the other churches in between. People come out of the world which is full of chaos and conflict and a mess. Many of us can think about our own family situations and say, yep, just in my own family it's a mess. And when they see the difference that God can make, it's shocking. Probably shocking like the old friends of Marlene's parents when they went from doing all the partying to absolutely not anymore, right? It can be shocking that way. So do life with God, be Jesus with skin on. We talked a little bit about this verse. I know it's super simple, but it's going to be one of the frameworks I want us to constantly think about. And so actually, before we get to that verse, we said if we follow the things we learn in this class and we actually put our faith into action, we will do or have 4 things at the end of this 6 weeks. So we're already 1 week in. Does anybody remember any of those 4 things? Lori?
Sharing our faith.
Yeah. We'll share our faith. Anything else?
Grow spiritually.
We'll grow spiritually. Yep. Anything else?
Help someone else grow.
What's that?
Help someone else grow.
We'll help someone else grow. That's probably the scary one. People don't want to write that one down. Yeah, we'll help someone else grow.
You can do that by saying stuff sometimes, though.
You can. You can. You definitely can help someone else grow by your example. Yep. And then the last one. You'll have a blueprint for your future spiritual growth. You'll have a blueprint for your future spiritual growth. All right, so Paul is talking to a group of disciples. Some are saying they follow Paul, some are saying they follow Apollos, and he's saying, no. Follow God, follow Jesus. Paul said, I planted, Apollos watered, but God made it grow. And so we've talked last week that planting is referring to what? Anybody? Sharing the gospel, evangelism. Right, evangelism in that spot, or sharing the gospel in that spot. And we spoke about 2 kinds of evangelism. Anybody remember? Preaching. We've got a good preacher here. We've got some other men that have done preaching really well here. Many of us will not preach. That's okay. The second thing is witnessing. And witnessing, when you say witnessing in a church building, it sounds really churchy, really religious. But when you think about witnessing outside of this, if you think about it in a court setting, in a TV show or a movie, what is witnessing? What are witnesses supposed to do when they're on the stand? Testify. Yeah. They testify to the truth. They tell the truth. I didn't write that. I didn't give you a space to write that. But somewhere on your sheet, write, tell the truth. So much misinformation is out there today about the definitions of things and what believers and Christians and disciples really think and do. We need to be the ones testifying to the truth, telling the truth. Your kids, our kids, they're growing up in a world that doesn't believe there's absolute truth anymore. There's more people that believe there's no absolute truth than there are people that believe there is absolute truth. And we have to be the voice. And we don't have to do it angrily. We don't have to do it with arguments on Facebook. We can simply say, when someone says something that's not true, that's interesting. I have a different perspective. And normally, if you stop there, they'll say, well, what is it? Which gives you great permission to tell them the truth. If they don't, say it anyway. Tell them the truth. You can say, I have a different perspective. I believe this, or I know this to be true. We need to speak the truth. Yep.
When you think witnessing, there's another side of witnessing, and it doesn't absolve us of this witnessing responsibility you just talked about. But possibly even more important is part of the courtroom setting is, this is what I witnessed. So what brought me to Christ is what I witnessed. Not someone teaching me as much as what I witnessed. And I think that's one of the most important roles is, if we speak it and we don't live it, then we've nullified the message. And worse yet, I think we blaspheme God. To say that you're a Christian and act unchristian-like, now we're going to do that occasionally by tripping. But that's a significant part of witness is how we live our lives and what people see.
Keith said that witnessing isn't just teaching people from the scriptures or telling them truth from the scriptures. witnessing, and actually this is what I mean by witnessing. Witnessing is more about saying what God has done in our lives. That's why we went over our conversion stories, because your conversion stories didn't happen on our own. So it's telling them about your conversion story. It's telling them about what God has done in your life, in our lives, and what he is doing in our lives. So great point, Keith. And that's just super important, that we are saying what God has done. And it's got to match up with how we're living. Thank you. The second part of this, it says Apollos watered. What does watering refer to, do you think? Please.
That's what you said, it was discipling.
Yeah.
Confirming or reaffirming the idea that was first planted to help it grow.
Yeah. Lisa said it's discipling. It's affirming or confirming the seed that has been planted to help it grow. And that's exactly right. And you think about that word, and some of us, again, are a little scared about that. Ooh, I don't know that I'm qualified to disciple someone else. But if we simplify it and say, well, what's a disciple? Someone who accepts and assists in spreading the teachings of Jesus. So whatever we've accepted in terms of the teachings of Jesus, we can help them accept. Whatever, and in doing that, we're helping them. We're assisting them in learning. But then we can't stop there. We want to help them share. So first of all, we got to be sharing. And you can bring someone along and show them how you do that. Most of the folks that I know that are very evangelistic, they're always bringing someone else along to watch and see and grow and learn, and it becomes a habit. We've got to do life together. We've got to do life with God. And part of it requires a relationship. So someone once said to me, when you're thinking about evangelism, you can't think about people like projects. And for the longest time, I had no idea what they were talking about. But eventually I realized what they're talking about is, when you think about a project, you complete a project. This is part of what I think they're thinking about. You complete a project. It's like, check, they're saved. Paul was never done with the churches that he preached at or converted people at. And he didn't convert that many people, but he was never done. Relationships should never be done. And so we need to continue on with those relationships because that's God's example with us, right? He doesn't just say, okay, save Monty, good, done. Save Steve, good, done. He continues that relationship. So, 2 quick points. One, when we think about discipling, the first person that needs to be discipled is us. So we need to allow God to disciple us. And the way that we do that is being open and looking for the things that he's trying to teach us and show us. And we learn that through our experiences. And so when you think about God and when you think about relationships, you don't really have a relationship unless you have trust. And so think about how God builds trust with us. There's this thing I came across called the trust equation. And the trust equation is what you see on the screen. Trust is developed when you have C plus R plus I divided by S. The C is credibility. You think about God's credibility with us and how Jesus built credibility when he was on this earth, right? It's credibility. It's, is God capable, right? And we all know Ephesians 3:20. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine according to his power that is at work within us. Credibility. if we watch and look and try to identify ways that God has built his credibility with us, I think we're going to start to develop an even stronger trust in him. The R stands for reliability. Do you do what you say you're going to do? Do you show up when you say you're going to show up? God does. Jesus did. If we look for how God has been reliable to us, I think, again, trust is just going to become stronger. He shows up at the right time for us. And the I stands for intimacy. You think about reliability. I think about Jesus saying in Matthew 28:20, and surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. So he's with us the whole time. He's given us the encourager as well. I stands for intimacy. If we think about Luke 12:7, indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid, you are worth more than sparrows. Intimacy is how well God knows us, knows our situation, knows our strengths, knows our weaknesses, knows how many times we've stumbled, all those sorts of things. Intimacy. This is obviously true with people-to-people relationships too, right? So if you rate these on a 5-point scale, God would get a 5 for credibility, he would get a 5 for reliability, and he would get a 5 for intimacy. And if you add those up, then he would have a max score of 15, right? The S stands for self-orientation. When you're very self-oriented, you're very selfish. And we all know God would probably get a 0 in self-orientation, which would make this number affinity, right? But for us, the best we can score is probably a 1. And then the max score is 15. When I think about self-orientation, I think about Romans 8:31 through 32. If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Right? We need to experience these aspects, these characteristics of God for ourselves, and we need to take note of them so that we can develop more trust. And so we can also see how we can build trust with other folks as we're sharing with them the teachings of Jesus. Okay. So we'll end there. The homework in the back of your sheet is all about preparing to witness again. And this time it's about writing down what God has done in your life and what he is doing. And when you're doing that, think about the things that he's done and the things that he's doing. Is it building his credibility? Is it building his reliability? Is it building intimacy? Is there anything there that shows how unselfish he is with us? Just end in a quick prayer. Father, we know that you have so much to reveal to us, so much love to give to us. Help us to learn to trust you more. Help us to learn how to build trust with others so that we can be like you to them, so that they can trust what we say because we trust what you say and do. We love you, Lord, and we pray that we will be your representatives in this world. In Jesus' name, amen.